This week in the enterprise security news, LasPass is no longer free. Tenable helps with dynamic assets, security scorecard, and the score planner. TrendMicro XDR, Imperva launches Sonar. Funding announcements from PerimeterX, Sphere, Red Canary, One Cosmos, and Strata Identity. In the acquisition news, Sailpoint to acquire Intello, Crowdstrike to acquire Humio, Palo Alto to acquire Bridgecrew, Kaseya to acquire Rocket Cyber, and hopefully I'll be acquiring some adult beverages. In the second segment, we welcome Christopher Crowley from Montes LLC. He's going to discuss the 2020 Security Operations Survey. In the final segment, Amit and Ganesh from Upticks will be here to discuss evaluating the MITRE attack evaluations in their third year. It's a lot of good stuff in that segment. Looking forward to it, as well as everything in the show. So stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
As your attack surface stretches from the data center to the cloud and the device edge, security teams need visibility across it all to confidently detect and respond to threats. Experience frictionless hybrid security that helps you stop breaches 84% faster with ExtraHop's Reveal X360, the first and only SaaS-delivered network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Face it, your data is everywhere. No matter where your data lives or what tools you use, Imperva Data Security unifies compliance, security, and privacy needs for any data store while saving you time and money. Imperva finds threats before they become a compliance or security incident, and built-in automation empowers you to remediate quickly. Give your business confidence about what is happening with your data, where it's stored, and who's accessing it. For a 30-day free trial of cloud data security, visit securityweekly.com/Imperva. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. Uh-oh, I hit bad buttons on my teleprompter. Hey, it's good to be here. It's episode, I think, 217. It is February 24th, 2021. I'm, of course, Paul Asadorian. Joining us remotely, Mr. Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to be back again after a week off, and a few things happened since we were gone.
Just a few. You'll get a lot of news to cover. I saw your notes in there. Mr. Tyler Shields is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Hey, Paul. I hope you got your teleprompter stuff sorted. I don't use one, so I'm old school.
You know what it is? I won't remember to read everything at the top of the show. It's been a huge. It'll be the next thing that gets upgraded too, because we have issues with it. So. Let's see. Now that I have my teleprompter back, I do have announcements. Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel, or sign up for our mailing list, and even join our Discord server, securityweekly.com/subscribe. Our next live webcast will be held on March 18th at 11 a.m. I always want to say p.m. It is 11 a.m. on March 18th. Eastern Time. You're going to learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats. You can visit securityweekly.com/webcast. We're going to be doing some Linux nerding out with Mr. Brandon Edwards and Adrian. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. The prep call
he gets
was
really passionate.
Yeah,
you know, if you haven't seen Application Security Weekly, he was on there this week, and they'll give you a little flavor for what you're in store for.
Yeah, we seem to share views, certain views about Linux, like the fact that they've changed all these things and tried to do snap packages, and you know, it's going to be a heated webcast for sure. So, but looking forward to that. If you want to check out the archive, securityweekly.com/on-demand. Now, on to the news. Lots. I guess we should start with acquisition funding announcements, because we've got 2 weeks of those, and we can cover those pretty quickly, I believe.
Sure.
The first one that they did an amazing job with the PR and marketing for PerimeterX raising $57 million. You couldn't not see this if you were paying attention in any capacity to the news. I saw it in Flipboard. I saw it in Owler. I saw it in my regular news feeds. You couldn't not see it. They did a great job. And they've got a good product. I think bot detection, certainly when we look at the fraud that is going up against unemployment claims, certainly was a poster child for bot detection. So it does not surprise me, $57 million in growth capital funding. I'm sure you guys saw this one because you could not see it.
I did. I did see it. It's definitely an interesting funding round. Primarily, what's interesting about it is the size of it. 57 million is a lot of capital for now. They have, I think, 150 or close to 150 invested into that business, and there's a lot of other players that swirl around this market. Direct competitors, Arcos and others that are doing similar fraud things. And then there's all of the web protection guys. Anything that's doing web protection has some kind of bot-ish play as well. So, at some point there's got to be, I think, some consolidation here, kind of rolling some of these players up into some bigger properties.
And in one of those bigger
get acquired.
There's been a lot of consolidation. I didn't Imperva bought one of the major players.
Goldman Sachs bought White Ops.
Yeah, there's been some consolidation in this space. The 800-pound gorilla in the room is Google, who likely would not acquire because they basically took reCAPTCHA and CAPTCHA to a whole new level. We did a webcast last year with them on it, and they've got millions and millions of people logging into their web properties every day, and they took that data and they do some really smart machine learning on that to come up with their bot detection, which I got a chance to dig into. I was super impressed with that. So you've got to be able to differentiate yourself against Google in this space, which I'm not saying is impossible, certainly. Google's got their shtick, but you need to have some differentiators against it. So,
well, it's always a danger, right? It's funny, some of the experiments you see, some of the big companies, the Facebooks and the Googles and the Apples out there, like for them, it's just an experiment. Yep. And a billion here, a billion there, who cares? But we've seen it in the past where, AWS can announce something that basically drops a whole category.
Yeah, I think Google's going to do well in this space. Not to say there's not room for other players, such as PerimeterX and several others. So.
One thing I wanted to point out that's not really any specific story, but I noticed ForgePoint pops up 3 times here. So they are busy. They're one of the few VCs that focuses just on security investments, cybersecurity startups. But still, it's interesting seeing them behind 3 of these announcements.
So data governance and privileged access from an all-woman startup that just got $10 million in Series A funding. I like this. I like this a lot, actually, because there's 2 fairly large. One is public, right? Varonis is public, and then you've got StealthBits. Are 2 of the prominent players in this space. I think it was time for a shakeup, for a newer company to come in and shake things up. So I like this a lot.
So the founder here, she actually came from StealthBits. So I think it's one of those things you see where, working for one company, you kind of see the gaps, what's missing, and then you see, some of those folks go on to fill that gap, start a company and take care of that.
Well, I think the addressable market here is really large, right? So you can carve out your niche in this market.
Yeah, data's the tough one.
Yeah.
People's access to things, as we've seen with Zero Trust here, and this actually does have implications for Zero Trust. I think if you look at how Google implemented BeyondCore, one of the biggest and most labor-intensive pieces was taking all of Google's employees and figuring out what they needed access to, what they should and shouldn't have access to. And that's a big piece of what I think Sphere is doing here. And until you have that on lockdown, it's really hard to do any of the other pieces.
Red Canary gets $81 million in funding. That's a big round for. I mean, they're still managed SOC primarily, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're a bit more focused than I think your typical MSSP. So, I think they consider themselves managed detection and response, which tends to be a little bit more focused than your general like outsource the whole SOC. Mm-hmm. So, managed detection and response, from most of what I've seen, they enhance your SOC. They work with your SOC folks, rather than seek to totally replace it. And honestly, the better quality plays I've seen have been on the MDR side. I've never heard a bad thing about Red Canary, but some of the MSSPs out there are just a mess. The company I started a couple years back, one of the things we did for our clients is we tested their MSSPs. Mm-hmm. And I remember throwing, you name it, ICAR, the kill switch for NotPetya, downloading malware from obvious places that should trigger an alert, and nothing. They never called up the customer. As much as I tried to make
set off
everything
alarms.
Look hacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. I think if it was, I was part of the decision-making process, I would go with a more point solution in the MDR front.
Than a broad one?
Yeah, than a more broad kind of play. Or have both, right? You've got a broad kind of play. Much like we have CRA, someone takes care of, there's a company that takes care of the IT, right? I want more strategic partners to help fill some of the gaps in the security program. Yeah,
there's definitely some good ones out there, but there's a bunch of stinkers as well.
Yeah, I like Red Canary. I like Deepwatch too. We spend a lot of time with Deepwatch. They do some great stuff over there. They got a great approach. So yeah, $81 million. It's good for them. Congrats.
Yep.
On 270% over the past 2 years revenue growth, which is fantastic. And they also doubled their customer count that came from channel partners last year. So they're expanding how they do their business as far as their go-to-market too. So the business itself looks like it's in really good health. Yeah. One other thing I noticed in the article too was a piece that they have in there around protection of cloud workloads. So it looks like they're starting to bridge the gap from some of the managed services to some more product-based offerings that allow them to, protect workloads and operations and things like that.
When you put it like that, $81 million should have been an easy round for them to secure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're 250 employees now, too, up 50%.
250 people.
Wow.
I remember talking to them when they had 3 people that were effectively doing all the SOC stuff.
Love it. It's awesome. One Cosmos secures $15 million in a Series A from ForgePoint Capital.
Yeah, good size Series A, and we're starting to see more and more of these passwordless plays. Which is going to be interesting in regulated industries because I think they're still trying to do multi-factor, while making it as convenient as possible for the user here. And interestingly, this one Cosmos, the user could be an internal enterprise user, an employee of the company, or it could be customers. So they have both a customer-facing enterprise product and then a employee-facing enterprise product.
So what's interesting about this one to me is that what they do, right? So it's been an idea, and I might be wrong, I don't know, I'm not intimate with their technology, but it's been an idea to do this kind of passwordless multi-factor or infinite factor auth based off of your phone and who you are and kind of the biometrics that come with all of that. Mm-hmm. The question I have, though, is two-factor simple enough with kind of the traditional 2FA auth where you open up your little Duo app or your token system and type in the number? Or does it really need to be simplified to the point that you just don't do anything? And is there enough value in the don't do anything value prop for customers to buy this solution en masse? And that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the consumer space, I mean, how often do you log into Twitter? Once you log in once, it keeps you logged in almost indefinitely. And that's the expectation at the consumer level. So I think the answer is yes at the consumer level, to somehow do multi-factor authentication to where the consumer continues to not have to do anything. And as we see more consumerization in the enterprise side, I could see people pushing for that as well. If you look at some of the stuff Facebook has done internally with their developers, because they've got thousands of developers, they pushed it to that point to where the developer has to do as little as possible to be able to authenticate and get into systems, and they actually built some of their own stuff in house.
I could see it from the commercial side, right? I agree, right? The ability to kind of do it almost like it bridges the gap between traditional auth and continuous auth if you do it right. Because from the consumer side, most of the auth is, you're right, it's tokenized, and you last 6 months, 8 months, whatever it is, 3 months before you have to rerun your token. But what if you could kind of bridge the gap to a continuous auth model? So literally every 5 minutes, it's fully authed against your biometrics. And that becomes interesting in so much as if they made it 100% invisible. And if that's what they can achieve, I think it's a really interesting space.
Yeah, I think if you can get away or do away with the multi-factor kind of pain in the butt and save cost there. In other words, I implement passwordless. Now I don't have to maintain tokens, phones, all that kind of stuff. I just do the passwordless thing. And if I get that benefit, like you were just talking about, Tyler, of the continuous authentication, so it's constantly monitoring. And if enough stuff changes and sets off alarms, then maybe I'm asked to do something different to prove who I am, but only when certain conditions change in a certain way does it ask me for that. I think that's a huge benefit to enterprises.
At the end of the day, though, the value is invisible to the actual user, which makes it somewhat of a difficult sale, right? Invisible security is the ultimate security, right? If we can get to the point where you can say, we always say like mobile security or application security. If we can get to the point you remove the word security from that discussion and it's just applications and it just works, or it's just mobile and it just works, that's the dream. But the hard part is when you're trying to sell that and the user doesn't see the value, right? What do you mean? I'm continuously authenticated on the background? I don't care, right?
Right.
And that's always been the difficulty with multi-factor is the friction still of having to open a Duo app or whatever app is still friction. And that's why a lot of people don't turn 2FA on. And so if we can lower that friction and embed it into the products that they use automatically, maybe we can actually get some adoption on some of this.
Mm.
So what you're saying is you have to increase the friction first so that you have a selling point for the reduced friction.
And in some ways we did by pushing people towards 2FA.
Yeah, we have already. What is Strata Identity? Is this a similar kind of play?
Strata Identity is so this is a multi-cloud play. The idea here, I think, is more for like cloud admins and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I apologize for the rant that I basically posted on this thing because I'm still kind of suspicious. I'm not sure that multi-cloud is really a thing that people have a strategy around. I mean, it's like, do you want to hit yourself in the face with a hammer? Why would you want to deal with two, instead of standardizing on one? But yeah, what they do is they're basically managing identity and auth across vSphere, AWS, Azure, public cloud, what they're calling private cloud, which I hate the term because I'm not sure I'd really consider vSphere private cloud, but yeah, it's basically what they're doing. And for me, I suspect like if somebody's doing multi-cloud, it's maybe Office 365 and Azure AD on the Azure side, and then AWS for production workloads. Like, does that count as multi-cloud? Are they calling that multi-cloud? I don't know.
I'm starting to see significant multi-cloud adoption specifically around developers gone wild, right? Where they just do whatever the hell they want. And that's where you start to see multi-cloud. Yeah, the shadow IT problem. And then trying to get your arms around shadow IT. Well, I can't just yank Azure out from underneath this development team that's been deving this tool for 6 months, 8 months, or a year. We're going to have to figure out how to embrace it and extend to it. And that's why I'm seeing multi-cloud adoption.
And that's the other thing. Like, even if they were doing multi-cloud, I would suspect that they're different teams using the different clouds, probably not the same team using multiple clouds.
Yeah, I think
that would be my expectation.
That's a valid, frequent assumption.
It still happens, but I think less frequent than you've got a large enterprise and this team's decided to build an app or a service and they're going to use AWS. And then, like you said, Adrian, there's another team. They've got different requirements, but they're going to use a different cloud provider, right? They're going to use Azure or Google for their service or application because the requirements are different, right? It does happen where you do have a set of services or maybe the same application that will cross clouds as well. I mean, I've seen it both ways. I think so much so we're going to see more announcements on and continue to see them on multi-cloud. CrowdStrike has announced the new Falcon Horizon with CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, because, we need more acronyms in this space.
Yeah.
But they provide this for multi-cloud environments and protects and remediates security risks in AWS, Azure, and Azure resources. They don't mention Google's cloud in there, and monitor for least privileges and ensure continuous compliance as well. So CrowdStrike continuing to expand its product portfolio to also include DevOps and cloud management as well.
And interestingly, this dovetails with Palo Alto Network's acquisition of Bridgecrew, which we talked about 2 episodes ago, I think. There was a rumor that they were going to acquire him for something north of $100 million, which was huge for a company that was less than 2 years old, and only raised $18 million to date. They had just raised their Series A, and the deal came out to be $156 million, and also in that CSPM space. So this is also getting thrown into that Prisma bucket that Palo Alto has been building out from a bunch of acquisitions.
I'm just wondering why it doesn't overlap with Redlock, which is a Prisma Cloud acquisition, right? So, what's the delta? What's the delta on Bridgecrew that made that worth $155 million?
Good question. I mean, some of these, I remember, because didn't they grab Evident also?
Yeah, Palo Alto just needed to buy another security company because
Palo Alto just literally buys whatever they can get their hands on. Right. It really doesn't matter.
But they usually buy really good companies, though. To their credit, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to say that either maybe this one doesn't make sense on the surface, right? The companies they bought are really good ones, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree totally. And if you look at their market cap in the public market, it's shown that those acquisitions have been positive, accretive acquisitions for them over time. And it's really delivered on a strategic investment direction in the security space. So I'm certainly not going to second guess it, but I was just curious if anybody knew the delta between Bridgecrew and, say, Redlock, and why that was
it's a great question.
A new play.
Yeah,
and I certainly don't know it. So
another thing to consider is that the acquisition isn't a really attractive customer list, or they're doing a certain market that they want to get into. So, some of these acquisitions can be just as much about the customers that they've landed or the markets that they play in as the technology itself.
Yeah, it's a great point. Okay, where do we want to go from here? Is that all the funding?
Paul,
yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I have one comment to make.
Yeah.
We have I think an all-time low in the past month or two on XDR comments in our list. There's only 2 mentions of XDR this week.
Only 2?
Only 2.
One of them was TrendMicro. I didn't pay too much attention. And was it CrowdStrike?
Yeah.
Not in the headline.
In the headline.
Was it TrendMicro? I got TrendMicro. Oh, yeah, CrowdStrike to acquire Humio to deliver index-free XDR.
Yes. So
you don't want indexes in your XDR. That's bad.
I think we've covered Humio in the past. I don't know if they were messaging on XDR when we covered them last. Maybe they were.
Or maybe they weren't, so. And CrowdStrike applied XDR to the moniker to make the $400 million acquisition make sense.
Wow.
So my understanding is Humio's basically a Splunk competitor, like Devo, and so many others out there. So that's the index-free comment, right? It's you don't have to build parsers for everything that you're shoving into it. And I think we've all probably heard complaints about how expensive Splunk can get. So that's kind of my, it's not really my take. I've seen other people chatting about this deal saying, this is going to save CrowdStrike customers a lot of money because they'll be able to use this internal Humio solution instead of paying Splunk tons of money to store that data.
I mean, CrowdStrike's becoming the next Palo Alto. And I mean, they're already well along on that path to becoming, checking
the
all
platform.
the platform to check the most boxes in my security architecture.
Yeah, what's interesting there, though, is that CrowdStrike is a security company first and continuing the security expansion into adjacent security markets, where Palo Alto really was a successful reinvention of an infrastructure company.
Agreed.
Similar to the play that Cisco tried to play and has kind of not been as capable on the execution
Palo
side.
Alto started out as a firewall company, though, when firewalls were the thing.
Firewall / infrastructure provider, right? Because everybody would put them with Juniper, Palo Alto, and Cisco networking gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the classic case of them trying to push something internally. I think some of the Palo Alto founders, if I'm not mistaken, came out of Juniper.
I think they did.
They couldn't convince them to move to like the application level stuff, and that was their big play. Is they gave you visibility and control at layer 7. So instead of just block or allow port 80 and 443, you could say Dropbox is allowed or not allowed.
I never told you my story. Now I have to tell my story, a short story about Palo Alto, where I was working for the university, and my boss at the time had worked at Stanford and knew some of the folks that were doing security startups. One of those people was Nir Zuck. That's his name, right?
Yeah, Nir Zuck.
I was in the same conference room with him in early 2000s when they started, and he was pitching and whiteboarding out this whole new firewall approach that could do it on the application level. I was like, I'm impressed. Like, if you can make that work, you're going to be wildly successful. Yep. She made that work.
Yep. They were wildly successful. Yep. And it actually does dovetail well into the strategy that they've taken over the last few years, right? With the acquisitions they've made is extending into the application layer more and more, right?
Right. And my skepticism...
Twistlock on ContainerSec,
but
Redlock for CloudSec.
It's interesting. My skepticism at the time was because I had put and seen a lot of products that other people had tried to put in the network at universities that were high bandwidth, especially for the time, and would just literally like go up and smoke or just not work at all. And I think that's why Palo Alto has had continued success, because they made that work and used that as a model to continue to build the company. So good for them.
So when it came out, we were a Checkpoint shop, and we actually bought a couple Palo Altos just for visibility. We didn't put them in line. We just we shipped them a copy of the traffic just to figure out what was going on, because the checkpoints were tough to replace.
All righty. What else we got in here? A couple more stories for we have to move on.
There's an interesting one that doesn't have to do with funding or companies directly. It's actually about breaches that I thought was interesting.
Go for it.
And it's, number 7 under mine. It had always been my assumption that, so we know big companies don't get killed by breaches. Only small companies do. And the assumption has been, I think for most people, including myself, until I read this, it was actually shared with me by Gabe Bassett, who's one of the folks on the Verizon DBIR team. That actually companies that have had a breach, when you look at them from a stock market perspective, they never really fully recover. So they looked at a bunch of high-profile breaches. And none of these companies after the breach have done better than they did before the breach. So they recovered to a point, but never completely. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And it's not a huge difference. It's like they drop 3% and they come up 2%. So they never come back up to where they were. But it's still significant that. It appears it does have a long-term impact.
Yeah, I didn't read the research, but now that you're pointing it out, I'm super interested in it. But like the 2 to 3% swings, like that's normal. That you can attribute that to market movement noise.
Yeah.
But there's a highlight here that says in the long term, breach companies underperformed the market. Okay, now you're getting into something interesting, right? Because after 1 year, the share price fell 8.6% on average and underperformed the NASDAQ by that amount. After 2 years, it underperformed by 11.9%. And after 3 years, the average share price was down by 15.6%. Now, the question I have, though, is I would love to do a deep dive, and I will probably do a deep dive on this analysis, but were these companies that had, I'm sure there were some that were significant negative outliers, were those companies already garbage products and companies? Or if we could classify the strength of the company or the momentum prior to breach, that would be very interesting to me. So I might dig into some of that myself.
Yeah, or it could be that the reason they got breached just correlates with the reason that they're doing bad in the market. Because they're bad culture, bad practices in general tend to lead to sucking in the market, not outperforming the NASDAQ and not doing well in general.
Yep.
Couple of quick announcements. Tenable has made an announcement that they are exposure platform for risk-based vulnerability management of dynamic assets. That is out there to read, as well as Imperva has launched what sounds like a new product called Sonar as well. We don't have time to dig into those too deeply, but those are two of the larger announcements that were out there. I think the Cisco App Dynamics is a duplicate from before. Kaseya did acquire Rocket Cyber, which I thought was kind of interesting given Kaseya's business model. Rocket Cyber's specialism is a cloud agent SOC that requires no hardware or specialized equipment and deploys seamlessly into customer environments. Anything else? Anything really quick you guys want to dig into in 2 minutes?
I don't know what the Tenable announcement is. I'm reading it, trying to figure it out. Maybe we could talk about it next time, but I don't. So it's a new product. It's Tenable.ep.
Yeah.
Exposure platform. And I don't, at a glance, don't understand what it is.
It says it combines vulnerability management, web application scanning, and container scanning, and Tenable Lumen into one platform.
Isn't that
another one of those? It's another one of those catch-all announcements that we do everything.
Well, it sounds like
I thought they were just going to call all that Tenable.io, but I guess combining all that, so it's a roll-up.
But it sounds like they're still positioning to brand and create and combine products to take over Security Center, which was their big product when I worked there for a long time. There was always kind of a shift from an on-premise kind of deployment and functionality that they had built in Security Center to put all that up in the cloud. And it sounds like they're finally well along their way moving in that direction.
It's like an internal consolidation.
Yeah. In the cloud. An internal external consolidation. That would be my guess. That would be my guess. Just kind of reading the headline, but outstanding. With that, we will take a short break and come back with Christopher Crowley coming up next.